Hey, I'm Serenity and this is my channel, and today we're joined by Nova, who's eating like a mac and cheese cup that is empty. So good for her. And today I'm introducing a new series on my channel I am so excited about. It is called Ludicrous Atrocities. It's about crimes that have been committed that honestly are just plain funny. There's no reason they should have happened, they just did, and it's a lighter series. This is one of the two new series I will be introducing on my channel this year, and it mostly is because I started to realize I was running out of hometown horror topics to cover. I would get through like maybe April and then I'd be out of them. So I needed to introduce newer series but that are still in the true crime realm. Today we're going to be talking about Victor Lustig, who sold the Eiffel Tower twice. The tower that he did not own. He was a revolutionized con man through the 1920s and 40s. So let's get into it. Ludicrous Atrocities is a new series on my channel where I find the most mind-boggling crimes ever committed. But the thing that all these crimes have in common is that they're mostly non-violent and the funniest crimes I have ever researched. They are a lot more lighthearted, they're funny to listen to, and basically I know the true crime genre can be hard to stomach. Most of the time you're hearing about dangerous and deranged things happening to unsuspecting victims. This series is for those of you who want to get into the true crime genre but can't hear about violent crimes. So I've gathered a list of non-violent crimes that are just hilarious. Something illegal happens, but for the most part, most of these stories, no one is harmed. At least not physically, maybe financially or emotionally. It's supposed to be lighthearted. I'm telling you about a crime that hopefully teaches you some sort of history, and you walk away without a heavy true crime case on your mind, learning something new and maybe having a laugh. That's the point of this series. So today we're talking about the man who sold the Eiffel Tower that he didn't own. Not one, but twice. This story is absolutely hilarious and just mind-boggling to think that it happened not just once but twice to someone. I decided this case was just so wild it had to be the one I used to kickstart this new series, and there was no better way than with Victor Lustig's crimes. Buckle up, grab a blanket, grab a snack, grab a drink, and let's get into it. Victor Lustig was born on January 4th, 1890, making him a Capricorn in, I'm not gonna say this right, Osane, Bohemia, Austria-Hungary, which today is the Czech Republic. From a young age, Victor was exceptionally gifted at learning. He actually knew several languages, but this also became a source of trouble in his life. At 19 years old, when he was taking a break from school in Paris, France, Victor started gambling. During that part in his life, Victor got a scar on the left side of his face after he was attacked by a jealous boyfriend of a woman he was associating with. After leaving school, Victor applied both his education and his fluency in multiple languages and began to embark on his life of crime. Eventually, he focused on conducting a variety of scams and cons which he would make way with property and money. This turned him into a professional con man. Before we get into the cons, there is some preface I want to give. During these times, con men were not gangsters. They were elegant gentlemen who were often smooth-talking immigrants. They wined and dined their victims, and they didn't call their victims suckers, but instead they actually called their victims marks. Also, Victor was married. On November 3rd, 1919, he married a pretty Kansas woman named Roberta Noret, who he had a daughter with and raised a secret family. He would lavish his family with his ill-gotten gains. The rest of his money he spent on gambling or his lover, aka side chick if you will. Her name was Billy Mae Scheibel. She was a owner of $1 million prostitution racket. In the beginning, many of Victor's cons were committed on people traveling the ocean on boats who sailed from New York City to France using the Atlantic ports. These people were newly rich during the Roaring 20s. Among these schemes he would pull on the rich travelers was where he posted as a musical producer who sought out an investment in a non-existent Broadway show production. When the services of transatlantic liners were suspended during World War I, Victor found himself in search of a new con to conduct, so he chose to travel to the United States. By this point, he began to earn a level of infamy amongst various law enforcement agencies for the scams he was committing, including one he conducted in 1922, in which he conned a bank into giving him money for a portion of bonds he was offering for a repossessed property, only to use the sleight of hand to escape with both the money and the bond. Before we get into Victor's most infamous con, selling the Eiffel Tower, what he's known for today, we have to talk about one of his most notable scams, known as the Romanian box. He would sell unsuspecting people a box that he claimed was actually a machine that could duplicate currency bills, aka money. Forging money is what I'm trying to say here. These bills that were placed into the box to be duplicated, with the only catch being that the device actually needed 6 hours to print an identical copy. This device was referred to as the Romanian box or the money box. This scam involved a specially designed mahogany mahogany or cedar wood box, roughly around the size of a steamer trunk, which a steamer trunk are like traveling trunks used back in that time, luggage. And the size of these, they would not exceed 13 inches in height, 24 inches in width, and 24 inches in length. Pretty decent. I think you can think of maybe like a carry-on bag today. The box design featured 2 small slots designed to take in bills and paper to print the duplicate on a compartment containing a false arrangement of levers and mechanisms that had to be operated to make duplicates. This included complicated rollers and brass dials inside the box. The ink used was radium, which, by the way, radium is actually very dangerous, and I could go on a whole tangent about this paint being deadly. The only catch with this magical device was that it took 6 hours to complete the job, as I said. So this device would better be known today as a popping machine, which wasn't invented until 1938, 9 years before Victor would have died. In order to convince people this device actually worked, Victor asked the person to give him a specific denomination of bill, so $20, $50, or $100. He would then insert this bill into the device along with the special copying paper, and then they would wait until the duplicate money was made. When the copy was made, Victor would take himself and his victim to the bank to authenticate the bill. In reality, he had just concealed a genuine banknote in the device, asked for the same denomination that he placed in the box, and then once the target was convinced of the magic box's powers, Victor refused to sell them the box until they offered him a high price to buy it. Victor would then pack the box with additional real banknotes to buy himself time for a clean getaway before the target knew that they had been conned. The scam was sometimes aided by a sidekick named Dapper, or Dan Collins, described by the New York Times as a former circus lion tamer and death-defying bicycle rider, whatever that means. One of the most infamous victims of this device was a Texas sheriff whom Victor had convinced to buy the box for about $1,000. Upon the target realizing he had been conned, the sheriff pursued Victor to Chicago, Illinois. When the two met again, the sheriff was conned into believing that he was just not using the device right, and he was handed a large wad of cash as compensation for his troubles. Now get this, the wad of cash that Victor gave this sheriff was actually counterfeited. Yeah, it was fake money. Not from the machine, not from the box, that didn't really work, it was just a box. But keep that in mind, this fake money. We'll get to where it comes from in a bit. So this counterfeit wad of cash eventually led to Victor's arrest by American law enforcement officers down the line. The irony is also not lost on me that a sheriff was trying to illegally make counterfeited money with this box. Victor quickly became known to detectives in over 40 American cities as the Scarred, due to the 2.5-inch gash on the left side of his cheekbone, which I mentioned earlier. Yet no matter how scarring looking Victor was, he was considered a smoothie who had never held a gun and enjoyed mounting butterflies, you know, like killing butterflies and then mounting them onto like a corkboard. It's in like Tinkerbell, I think. So records show that Victor was actually 5'7" tall and weighed about 140 pounds. He was non-threatening. Victor Lustig's other schemes also included fake horse race schemes, faked seizures during business meetings, and bogus real estate investments, all of which we don't have time to get into, but they sound like a hoot. These scams made him both public enemy #1 and a millionaire. Being a millionaire in the early 1900s would make Victor a billionaire today. In May of 1925, a 35-year-old Victor Lustig was traveling back to France while he was staying in Paris. He came across a newspaper article discussing the problems that came with maintaining the Eiffel Tower. This article gave him inspiration for his next con. During this time, in the 1920s, maintaining the Eiffel Tower had become such a hassle that the city was finding it increasingly expensive to keep repainting it and maintaining the structure's grounds. In passing, the article had mentioned how the citizens of Paris had begun to call for the removal of the tower. This became the key to convincing Victor's targets. After he researched what he needed to know additionally to what he had read in the article, Victor began to prepare his scam, which included hiring a professional forger to produce fake government seal stationery for him to use. Once his plan was solid, Victor invited a small group of scrap metal dealers to a confidential meeting at an expensive Parisian hotel, where he then identified himself to the group as the Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs for Paris. During the meeting, he convinces these men that the upkeep of the Eiffel Tower had become too much money for the city of Paris, so the French government wished to sell it for scrap metal. However, the deal would be controversial and likely spark public outcry, so nothing could be disclosed until the details were ironed out. Victor would reveal that he was in charge of selecting a dealer who would receive ownership of this structure, claiming that this select group was chosen because of their reputation as honest businessmen. Victor speech also included a genuine insight about the monument's place in the city and how it did not fit in with Paris's other well-known monuments like the Gothic cathedrals and the Arc de Triomphe. During his time with these scrap dealers, Victor kept watch on a target who would most likely fall for the scam of purchasing the Eiffel Tower. This man's name was André Pexels. He was an insecure man who wished to rise up amongst the inner circles of the Parisian business community. André showed keen interest in purchasing the tower, so once the dealers sent their bids to him, Victor chose his target, arranging a private meeting with André. During this meeting, Victor told André he was a corrupt government official, claiming that his government position did not pay him a generous salary for the life he wished to enjoy. Victor told André that the sale of the Eiffel Tower would secure André a place amongst the top Parisian businessmen. André agreed to pay a large bribe to Victor and secure himself the ownership of the Eiffel Tower. Once Victor received his bribe plus the funds for the monument's sale for about $70,000 francs, he fled to Austria. That 70,000 francs would be worth about 1,187,188 francs today. Also, the franc is no longer the franc currency, but in fact the euro, which is used today. Victor suspected that when André found out that he had been conned, he would be too ashamed and embarrassed to inform French police of what he had been caught up in. Even though this is what Victor believed, he regularly checked the French newspaper articles while he was in Austria. His suspicion soon proved to be fruitful when he couldn't find any reference to his con within the newspaper, and thus he chose to return to Paris later that year to pull off the scheme again. However, when Lustig attempted to con another group of dealers and had managed to find a target amongst them willing to buy the Eiffel Tower, the police were informed about the scam and he fled to the US to evade arrest. So he technically never actually sold the Eiffel Tower a second time, but he was very close to doing it, and if the police weren't on his tail, he probably would have done it multiple times, and who knows when the police would have been tipped off. Today, the Eiffel Tower is owned by the city of Paris and has entrusted its management to a development company, of which it owns 99% of the capital. Victor liked to boast of his criminal achievements and even wrote a list of rules for would-to-be swindlers to use. Here they are. Lustig's 10 commandments of the con. 1. Be a patient listener. It is this, not fast talking, that gets a con man his coups. 2. Never look bored. 3. Wait for the other person to reveal any political opinions, then agree with them. 4. Let the other person reveal religious views, then have the same ones. 5. Hint at sex talk, but don't follow up unless the other person shows a strong interest. 6. Never discuss illness unless the special concern is shown. 7. Never pry into a person's personal circumstances. They'll tell you all eventually. 8. Never boast. Just let your importance be quietly obvious. 9. Never be untidy. And 10. Never get drunk. Honestly, solid. Very solid advice. When the Great Depression hit in 1929, Victor decided to concoct a very risky scam aimed at Al Capone. Al Capone, you know, America's most notorious gangster, aka Scarface, the movies that The Godfather are based on, that Al Capone, the man who ran an empire of crime in Chicago, Illinois, the empire of gambling, prostitution, bootlegging, bribery, narcotics trafficking, robbery, protection rackets, and murder? That man? Yeah, that's who we're talking about. Fun fact, during the Great Depression, Al Capone actually ran a soup kitchen by sponsoring a charity who would serve up 3 hot meals a day to 1,000 unemployed people. No questions asked. Anyways, that's besides the point. Victor knew what he was going to attempt on Al Capone. He could face death if his mark realized he had been conned. For Victor, the scam was not a straight out con, but one designed to get his target on to part with a relatively small amount of cash. Victor asked Al Capone to invest $50,000 in a crooked scheme, then kept the money given to him in a safety deposit box for 2 months before returning it, claiming the deal had fallen through. The mobster had gotten the impression that he was dealing with an honest man. At this point, Victor told Al Capone that the failure of the deal meant he lost all means of supporting himself. He then convinced Capone to give him $5,000 to tide him over, which was exactly what Victor had originally planned to do as the con. By the way, $50,000 in 1929 is worth over $867,000 today. That's not a small amount by a long shot, and the $5,000 that Victor actually kept is worth about $86,000 today. Again, that's a lot of money. So let's get into Victor's demise. On December 11th, 1928, businessman Thomas Kearns invited Victor to his Massachusetts home to discuss an investment. During that visit, Victor crept upstairs and stole $16,000 from a drawer, which was out of character for him. Thomas told the police, then the Texas sheriff deceit happened. These two actions garnered the attention of the Secret Service. Secret Service agent named Peter A. Rambano, a heavy-set Italian-American with a double chin, sad eyes, and an endless dream of ambition, vowed to put Victor behind bars. Rambano was born and raised in the Bronx of New York, and he had made his name after arresting the notorious gangster Ignazio the Wolf Lupo. Rambano got the fame high off of seeing his accomplishments in the newspapers, so he put his mind to capturing Victor, especially after he started a money forging business that came to Rambano's attention. So this is where that fake wad of cash comes in again. Victor Lustig teamed up with a gangland forger named William Watts, who was apparently a Nebraska pharmacist, to create fake banknotes. They were so good at it that their money had fooled multiple bank tellers, which was a feat in itself because they were forging $100 bills, which are the bills most scrutinized by bank tellers. They would use engraved plates that would be used to print the counterfeit banknotes, and Victor organized a ring of carriers to distribute the forged bills, ensuring that they were kept in the dark regarding the production of the counterfeits. The operation managed to inject thousands of dollars of counterfeit money, nicknamed Lustig money, to the US economy each month for the next 5 years. So the increasing amount entering circulation eventually drew attention from the Secret Service, which would eventually aid in Victor's demise. Victor became super difficult for the Secret Service to catch. He would actually travel the world with a trunk of disguises so he could easily change his look. He was known to disguise himself as a rabbi, a priest, a bellhop, or a porter. When dressed as a bellhop, he could leave a hotel quickly, plus take his baggage with him. Now, by certain accounts, Billy May, Victor's mistress, learned that he was cheating on her with a young mistress, so she phoned an anonymous tip to the federal authorities on Victor's whereabouts as an act of revenge. Pretty savage, actually. And this tip is what is thought to have led to Victor's downfall. On Sunday, May 10th, 1935, on a street corner in New York City, a voice ordered Victor Lustig to put his hands in the air as a group of men circled him. Agent Rambano handcuffed Victor and led him away. Victor was being charged with counterfeiting, and he did openly admit to having a partner's involvement in the forgery operation. He himself faked innocence on the matter. However, due to Victor's refusal to disclose information, led to a key being found on his person in his coat pocket at the time of the arrest. The key was later found to open a locker in Times Square in the subway station, which held $51,000 in counterfeit bills and the plates in which the money had been printed on. What should have been a victory for the Secret Service wasn't for long. On September 1st, 1935, almost 4 months later, the day before Victor's sentencing hearing, while faking an illness, Victor escaped a coined, inescapable federal detention center in Manhattan, New York. He used a rope made out of bed sheets, cut through his jail bars, and swung from the window like a man hanging off of Rapunzel's hair. A group of onlookers stopped and pointed at the hanging Victor as he took a rag from his pocket and pretended to be a window cleaner, not a prisoner trying to escape. Victor jumped from the makeshift rope, landed on his feet, took a polite bow for his audience, and then sprinted away. As police dashed to his cell, they discovered a handwritten note placed on Victor's pillow. It says as follows: "He allowed himself to be led in a promise. Jean Valjean held his promise. Even to a convict, especially a convict, it may give the convict confidence and guide him on the right path. Law was not made by God, and man can be wrong." Very poetic. Victor evaded the law until the Saturday night of September 28, 1935, so less than 27 days since he had escaped prison. In Pittsburgh, he was hiding out and he had just gotten into a car when FBI agents G.K. Firestone gave the signal to Pittsburgh's Secret Service agent Fred Gruber for them to chase Victor on wheels. For 9 blocks, their vehicles rode neck to neck. Victor's driver refused to stop even when the agents repeatedly rammed their car into his, locking their wheels together. The cars came to a crashing halt. The agents pulled out their service weapons and threw open their car doors. According to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Victor told his captors, "Well, boys, here I am." Absolutely iconic last words. In November of 1935, Victor Lustig faced a judge in New York. Victor pleaded guilty at his trial and was sentenced to 15 years in prison at Alcatraz Island in California for his original charge, with a further 5 years for his prison escape. As soon as he stepped onto Alcatraz Island, prison guards searched Victor's body for any weapons, such as a concealed watch springs or razor blades on his body, and they then hosed him down with freezing cold seawater. Guards marched him along the main corridor between these cells, which are known as Broadway, butt naked as the day he was born. By December 7th, 1946, Victor had made a staggering 1,192 medical requests and filed for 500 7 prescriptions. The prison guards believed he was faking an illness, that this illness was part of some sort of elaborate escape plan. Guards had even found torn bed sheets in Victor's cell, which showed signs of his expert rope making. According to medical reports, Victor Lustig was, and I quote, inclined to magnify physical complaints and constantly complaining of real and imaginary ills, end quote. Victor was then transferred to a secure medical facility in Springfield, Missouri, where doctors soon realized he was not faking any illness. He actually had pneumonia. On March 9th, 1947, he had been diagnosed, and 2 days later, on March 11th, 1947, he died from complications arising from his pneumonia at the Medical Center for Federal Prisoners in Springfield, Missouri. Somehow, for some reason, Victor Lustig's family kept his death a secret for 2 years, until August 31st, 1949. But Victor's hidden departure from Earth was not even his greatest deceit. Over 65 years later, in March of 2015, a historian named Thomas Adel from Victor's hometown of Hosestein began a tireless search for biographical information about the town's most famous citizen. As he searched through records rescued from Nazi bonfires, pored over electoral rolls and historical documents, Thomas realized that there was not even a lick of evidence that Victor Lustig was even born. He pulled a true Houdini con-like act. So we may never know the real identity of Count Victor Lustig, if that was even a stage name or not. However, we do know that whoever Victor was, that man died at 8:30 p.m. on March 11, 1947. Now get this, on his death certificate, a clerk wrote for his occupation that he was an apprentice salesman. Victor was for sure selling something, cons and scams. This is just a mind-boggling true story. Now I want to know why a movie hasn't been made about Victor Lustig. It has all the Hollywood credentials needed to make a blockbuster. Gentleman conman, fast action car chases, crooked sheriff, prison escapes, Al Capone. Yeah, if I see a movie on this in a couple years, I'm gonna say it's because of me. It probably won't be. No one in Hollywood is watching this. Anyways, that is all the information I have on Victor Lustig and his life of crime. It is such an interesting case. I had so much fun researching this. I used a lot of actually Smithsonian magazines history entries, which is really funny because I've never used that before to research anything. But the way they would write these stories was like they were trying to write some sort of action novel. It was great. So if you have any fun, conman, dumb crime you want me to cover in this series, let me know down below. I have some really fun ones coming this year. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts on Victor, if you think he should get a Hollywood movie about him, and who would you want to play him? I have no idea. Let me know. The doggo picture of the day is this picture of Nova sleeping. She likes to sleep on her back. She likes her belly rubbed. Alright, love you, mean it, kisses. Don't do anything stupid, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!